Building a digital relationship with a prospect is just fundamentally, for me, one of the greatest things you can do as a personal brand. Today, LinkedIn is the place to do it.
I feel now if I was sending an email to 1,000 people that have engaged with my content or have seen me, there's more of a chance that they will open the email.
If a company invests in building a brand on LinkedIn and producing content, how are they going to know that they're being successful?
Ultimately, revenue needs to be the North Star, but there's also the element of you just feel it.
The percentage of people in buying mode at any one point is less than what it's ever been. So which makes our job, especially in sales, even harder.
But why is it that you think that so many leaders are so reluctant?
It comes down to insecurity. Insecurity is fundamentally the reason people don't do this. If we could just get over that hurdle, we'd have a lot more personal brands out there, that's for sure, which is also why if it was easy, everybody would do it. This isn't easy.
Creating a successful fintech is super tough. I've been fortunate enough to be part of the journey for 2 fintech unicorns, and I've become obsessed with cracking the code. Join me and my guests, all experts in their domain, as we attempt to find the secrets and share them with you. Welcome to the Hive Mind.
Welcome back to another Hive Mind. The subject today is one of my favourites. It's the issue of social media and personal branding. My 2 guests, Hanna and George Boot, came to my attention quite recently. We share the same opinions on the importance of personal brand and how it can let buyers get to know the business that they want to deal with. Justin and George, thanks very much for joining me.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Great.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this one.
So, look, I don't think this is going to be particularly contentious because I think we're very much on the same page. So hopefully this is interesting. But, you know, from a perspective of a personal brand and social media, why do you think companies don't really embrace this? It doesn't feel like many companies have adopted it.
I think I'll take the first stance on this one. I think in the B2B world, I do think that companies want all of the upside of their employees posting on LinkedIn, but they don't want to take zero of the risk. And I think that's probably the main underlying thing that I've noticed is that different payment companies I've worked at, they always want the ROI of it, they want the upside of it, they want the brand side of it, they want their, and as sales, I think Justin will agree with me here, as sales executives and the sales managers and equally sales leaders, you always want your salespeople out of the office. You never really want them in the office. Why? To create relationships, all that kind of stuff. And as a successful marketer in today's world, I do believe that personal branding is one of those things that's it's kind of a taboo topic, especially in B2B. And when it comes to the general sales process as well, building a digital relationship with a prospect is just fundamentally, for me, one of the greatest things you can do as a personal brand. And today, LinkedIn is the place to do it. I mean, you can look at other platforms, but for me, LinkedIn has been where we've been successful, I think, from your perspective.
Definitely. I think, look, people go on LinkedIn at any time of the day. So when I look at with my sales hat on as a salesperson, we've spent years cold calling, we've spent years cold emailing. I'm not saying that doesn't work. It's still opportunistic. It's timing. However, I feel if I was to send a cold email to 1,000 people that have never seen me or seen my name before, 99.9% of them emails would be deleted. I feel now if I was to send an email to 1,000 people that have engaged with my content or have seen me, there's more of a chance that they will open the email. Open the email is a great start. I'm not saying they're going to run back and say, let's have a conversation, please sell to me. But it's about building credibility and trust. And as consumers, there's a reason why TripAdvisor is so successful. There's a reason for that is because people want to see before they buy. Now, LinkedIn, in my opinion, is given the ability for buyers to see the person they're buying from, not necessarily the products. And we see this on LinkedIn every single day, people just throwing out their product and reposting their product. People might not even care about the product if they don't know who you are. And one example I always use is when people go into Dragon's Den, and I got this from George. When people go into Dragon's Den, they don't necessarily always want to buy from Deborah Meaden, but everybody wants Stephen Bartlett. Why? Because he's the face of the product that is going to be selling it for them. And that I think people now are trusting the influencers that talking about the challenges that they have as buyers. And that's the main piece here is you're building credibility and trust in you because you're talking about the challenges that a business has.
But on the Stephen Bartlett thing, it's the narrative of him constantly showing you that he's succeeding at what he's teaching you to do. which is if you want to build a personal brand, I wouldn't take necessarily personal brand advice off of someone that isn't doing it themselves. And that's why when you see people go into Dragon's Den, he's got a history of building brands, and he's shown it along however many years he's been posting content for. So naturally, you're always going to trust that he's able to deliver on the thing that you're asking him for. That's all we're doing as personal brands, is being able to demonstrate consistently every week that we know what we're talking about, the challenges and problems that people face. If we can demonstrate that consistently for free, you know, in the back of your mind, you're kind of thinking, well, what happens if I pay them? You know, and that's the kind of thing that we're always trying to do with social media.
It gives rise to a really good question, which is, what is personal brand? Because I think there's a lot of negative association. People think that it's about typefaces and logos.
Yeah, this is interesting.
But what you're describing is, I think, two things for me. It's reputation and a sense of familiarity with the individual.
Mm-hmm. Again, it's only reputation. If we could stop calling it personal branding and just call it that person's reputation, the only difference is it exists on a digital platform, not in a face-to-face environment. People have a face-to-face reputation that with their friends, their family, their peers and their colleagues, but all personal branding is a digital one. I do think it's literally that simple. If we can present and have a good reputation digitally, that's only going to make a wider scale of people trust us. And therefore, when we do reach out or when they do have a problem, I or Justin or Nomu Pay are the people they think of when that conversation is needed.
Right. I don't want people, when they think of the business that I work for or me as an individual, to think that I'm a robot. I want them to know me for who I am, and the same person I'm going to be on LinkedIn, on a platform, is the same person that when I meet that individual face to face, who's going to be the same person when I go home and spend time with my family. And it's just trying to be that complete person. I'm not saying you're always going to be the same, because you can get annoyed at work, or you can get annoyed at home, whatever that may be, but it's making sure that person can actually trust what I'm saying, because I'm honest when I need to be. And I think as a buyer myself, when it comes to the B2C side of things, I want to make sure when I'm buying from a brand that I know that brand. There's a reason now why Nike just have a Nike tick. They don't need a slogan. People know who they are. When I think of Nike, I still think of Tiger Woods. Mm-hmm. Right. And when I think of Tiger Woods, I think of Nike. So what I want is, when people wake up in the morning, they're having problems when it comes to payments, I want to be the person they think of. Mm-hmm. Now, the brand behind me will only benefit from that. The business I work for will only benefit if the individual on LinkedIn is successful, because from a sales perspective, you win more deals because people are coming to you because they think you've got credibility, because that perception you've given off and that brand and that reputation is, this guy knows what he's talking about. That for me is my end goal, is people think this guy knows what he's talking about.
And that ties back to the first question in why don't B2B companies normally like it, is because everybody thinks, or the most companies that I've worked with genuinely believe that personal branding is very selfish, and you're building it for yourself. You're building it for your own future, which to a degree, yes, you are. But the content that you're consistently posting is around payments. It's around the challenges. I mean, how are you going to put those prospects and those challenges anywhere different than the current employee you're working for? Again, it's putting the upside of create a personal brand. And this is something that I spoke about recently at a demand gen meetup around. My biggest bet for 2025 is that B2B companies are going to start to hire personal brands over experience when it comes to sales. And this is a huge thing that I'm kind of looking into at the moment and I think the acquisition of Justin and Grant for NomuPay, which we can chat about in a moment, is the start of that. I genuinely believe it is the start of the fact that a company has reached out to people that are actively vocal on LinkedIn, speaking about challenges, not just that their prospects are having, but the company is having when it comes to sales pipeline creation, managing pipeline, actually creating a sales process that benefits the company long term, not just short term. When you're visibly talking about that, companies are going to want to employ you.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's pretty simple.
Building public, right, is a thing. People go on LinkedIn for a few things: to be educated, to be entertained, or to get a new job, right?
Yep.
I go onto LinkedIn because I want to be educated and I want to be entertained. Mm-hmm. If I wanted to go and find a new job, I'd go onto LinkedIn. If I was recruiting for a role and somebody applied for the role and I get a CV, what's the first thing you do? You go onto LinkedIn. Someone tells your name, you go onto LinkedIn. And as George mentioned, if I was to recruit right now and I had somebody that had been in payments for 3 or 4 years, but had a following of 15,000 people, as an example, I'd watch their videos to see if they know what they're doing and what they're talking about, compared to someone that may be in payments for 30 years and doesn't do anything on LinkedIn. I feel I will know more about that person within 3 or 4 minutes, as opposed to wasting 30 minutes on an interview where it's a waste of everybody's time.
But what's the purpose of an interview?
I think LinkedIn is my way of interviewing people.
To get to know people.
To get to know someone,
Absolutely.
to understand if they actually know what they're talking about. So why not do it all the time anyway and use that as your consistent interview process, and then you'll never really need to do an interview again.
Absolutely.
I think it gives rise to a really interesting point, which is, if a company invests in building a brand on LinkedIn and producing content, how are they going to know that they are being successful? Like, is leads the ultimate, measure of that, or is that myopic?
Again, it ties back to one of the reasons why companies don't lean into this, is because the measurability of it is incredibly difficult. It's like trying to measure brand. It's incredibly hard. I think ultimately revenue needs to be the North Star. Ultimately, it has to be. But there are ways you can measure brand. There are ways you can measure whether personal branding is working. A simple one is putting a "How did you hear about us" box on your website. Don't make it a drop down, make it a mandatory field that they have to fill in. Qualitative research, and then just for a simple thing, have that map back into a Slack or a Teams channel that's got your CEO in it or your head of marketing in it, so they can see every single time a lead comes in what that self-reported attribution says. And if that attribution starts to mention things like podcasts, LinkedIn, TikTok, whatever it might be, you can start to qualitatively measure whether it's working. But there's also the element of you just feel it. I can't explain it. You can feel that it happens. We were looking at it this morning when doing your wrapped post for this week, and we were looking at the opportunities, and I asked you how many opportunities have come from it, and there are a significant amount of inbound messages that have come your way that have filled the pipeline and your team's pipeline over the last 12 months that we have attributed back into the CRM, that have put, LinkedIn inbound message or whatever it might be. If you wanted to measure it, there are ways to measure it. I just don't think brands want to lean into that side of things just yet.
Yeah, until they're really seeing the reason I want to work with you is because seeing what someone put on LinkedIn, right? How rare is that? Is rare. What I would say when it comes to LinkedIn, when it comes to sales cycles are becoming longer because buyers are taking longer to decide what they want. But actually, the transactional cycles are becoming shorter because when they know what they want, it moves a lot quicker. So I've had individuals that come to me via LinkedIn on messages and say, "Hey, I see what you've been talking about. Can we have a conversation because I'm having X, Y, Z as a challenge?" Mm-hmm. Now, for me to try and get that out of that, and it was an ICP for us, would take months and months and months and months, probably for them to delete most of my emails or my calls or try and meet them at networking events. But actually, I've been speaking about the problems they've been having by never speaking to them. That is the power that you need to try and convince the rest of the business who are not too sure on investing into the social media aspect. Now, there's a reason why George is in the business, right? Because the business saw what he's been able to do with a brand, and we're going to try and replicate that plus some and have investment. That's what I find. No better feeling for me personally. That's always closing deals is great. But when somebody comes onto the website or comes through LinkedIn and says, "Hey, I want to work with you guys because I love what you guys do." They might not have any idea what we do, but we talk about our challenges, and it's just that credibility. And it goes back to the whole, as a B2B buyer, it's turning more into the B2C experience. So people will go on LinkedIn, not just between 9 to 5. That might be when people only check their emails 9 to 5. You go on your train into the office, when you go to the toilet, when you're watching the football in the evening, when you're waiting to pick your kids up at school. That is when, as LinkedIn as a platform, actually, yes, it is a social media platform. Let's be completely honest. People use it just as much as the other platforms now in the B2B world. And for me, it's a 24/7 conference that you're always going to be available to talk to people. And I find that really interesting.
One of the things that I find interesting is that people believe that how businesses and individuals buy is different. And it's more similar than, not when you go to the local shop and you buy a packet of crisps, but if you buy a high value item like a car or a bike or a laptop or something, actually the journey is the same. You go and conduct your research, you find out what other people that have
you watch
used
content,
think about it, and you consume content.
The last car I bought, I probably watched about 15 different videos on YouTube from different reviewers so I could get different perspectives on the car. I genuinely don't think that's any different now than how someone would buy a B2B SaaS platform.
Couldn't agree more.
I genuinely don't think it is. I think you could... I noticed it with a previous executive I work with, and we were talking about it, and they said, I was served an ad on LinkedIn, blah blah blah. I've seen this brand multiple times, but the actual buying process of that was I went onto a certain platform and I downloaded the app and I signed up for the free trial. I didn't want to engage with a salesperson during that process. It was a case of, well, and then I challenged them and I said, look, you know what you've just done there, haven't you? You've gone through the whole process of buying a multi-million-dollar SaaS platform via a free trial. You haven't engaged with their sales team once just because you want to test it, you want to play with it, you want to make sure it's the right thing. That's just how people want to buy now. And you'd be naive to think that that's not the way people are looking at payment solutions, for example. They'll be looking for test environments. They'll be looking for all these different things. They'll be in their chat, like WhatsApp channels. They'll be WhatsApping other CROs, CEOs, CFOs to say, have you worked with these guys before? And it might not even be, even if the platform's the best that they can find, they'll say, customer service was pretty, didn't like it.
But there's a really interesting, deep psychological issue here, which is businesses being comfortable letting go. Like they feel safe because their model is built on a salesperson. And if the customer wants any information, they've got to have a conversation with the salesperson, and that kind of wraps them in a warm blanket. But actually, how many people, how many conversations are they missing out because people don't?
It's a legacy mindset, right? It's a legacy mindset. The future CEOs, CTOs, and CFOs right now are on TikTok, right? That's it. So I'm not going to start being on TikTok, but it's just a social media platform. Right, they want to consume content as much as possible. What they don't want to consume is being cold called at 9 o'clock in the morning. It's just not what they want. They've got other things to do. They want to be able to look at things in their own time. So when we talk about the percentage of people in buying mode at any one point, it's less than what it's ever been. So which makes our job, especially in sales, even harder. So how can you try and be a little bit different from the rest of the people you compete with, especially in payments? It's an extremely saturated market. There's more payment companies than ever before. There's more salespeople than ever before. There's more sales tools to allow salespeople to be lazy than ever before.
And there's more AI-based messaging, and people's inbox are getting absolutely blitzed.
Exactly. So how can you be the difference? Now, we see it every single day. AI comments on LinkedIn are the bane of my life right now, because you kind of feel that the hard work you're putting in to create content and speak to people is trying to be eaten up by AI bots. I think it's a great idea. However, it's only as good as what you're putting into it when it comes to AI. So it's very easy, and we just call it, it's quite smelly. You can smell AI on LinkedIn.
I had someone give that a name to me the other day that I hadn't heard before. The Uncanny Valley. Have you heard of that?
I haven't, no.
No, I haven't.
So yeah, have a look at that. It's basically when it almost sounds human, but there's something that you can't quite put your finger on that gives it away as AI, and it gives you an ick. Yeah. It gives you the ick, and actually the net result of that is more damaging because it says that there was no care or attention that was put into that. So there's a big AI
annoy people
backlash.
even more, right? When people think actually someone hasn't even gone to the time and effort of being personal to me. They've got a bot doing it for them. That, if anything, that will tarnish your reputation. We've had this conversation around: would you rather put on LinkedIn, not speak to your ICP for 6 months? Where they might be seeing you, but you don't know they're seeing you, or would you rather email that ICP every month for 6 months and really annoy them?
I'd rather do the first
It
one.
would damage the reputation compared to actually build credibility and trust. And that's what goes, that sales cycle becomes even longer, because you can put it into your CRM, email the ICP, emailed, cold called, emailed. People go, it's a great cadence. Really, really good cadence. Well, it's not, because they've not looked at it once. Actually, you can see that they've liked a LinkedIn post, as an example. That's more engagement than any of these emails. But it may take 6 months for you to build that credibility and trust for them to go, I agree with that. They may screenshot that, send that to someone else in their business on Slack or Teams, and then someone else in the business then goes onto your website, fills out the contact us form and puts Google, because people are lazy sometimes. Then what happens is the marketing team will all give themselves a real big clap on the back to go, hey, we've just got this ICP just come to the website, randomly said he found us on Google. Great work, guys. Let's invest more into SEO.
And that's so important. And George touched on that earlier, which is the issue of attribution. And it's a feature of so many conversations that we are geared up based on this last touch attribution. You know, the last thing that they clicked on that brought them to the website gets credited as the source of the lead. But actually, it was everything that went up to that. And so few businesses actually do that in a qualitative rather than a quantitative way. And that example of you attributing to Google what was essentially down to 6 months worth of brand and content is a perfect example of that.
Yeah, which is why I don't think we can fall in love with attribution. I feel like we try to measure too much in marketing. We've got, the more technology we've had available to us, the more we've tried to measure things that quite frankly don't matter, which is last touch attribution. I get it, it's important, but only if it's accurate. Data's only should be important if it's accurate. And last touch attribution is very rarely accurate. It's quite often wrong.
But it requires a bit of a psychological leap of faith, doesn't it, for leadership to accept some things you can and should measure and some things you simply can't.
Yeah.
I think nobody wakes up in the morning wanting to go and buy from a SaaS or B2B business.
No.
They don't just wake up wanting to do it. There has to be a tipping point for something to happen, for them to go, actually, I'm having a problem. I need help. Who do they think of? If my golf clubs break tomorrow, what do I think? What brand do I think I need to go and buy some more clubs from? What shop do I need to go to? That's how it becomes front of mind into the buyer's thought process when there's a reason.
And I think going back to what you just previously said around all the steps that it would take in a CRM, so you'd put 6 months worth of contacting, 6 months worth of this, 6 months worth of that. Again, it's pointless data if nothing's actually being tracked. But all we're saying is do 6 months of something else.
Yeah.
Which is build a digital relationship with someone.
What's the worst that could happen?
Either way, it's 6 months. 6 months. You need to either cold email them or cold call them and annoy them for 6 months, or just serve them great content for 6 months and they might come your way. And I'm not saying you don't have to reach out at all, but reach out after you've served them 6 months worth of content. That's when you should reach out.
Yeah.
And suddenly notice that the rate at which people pick up the phone has increased.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yep.
I always say this to people that I've spoken to in the past is, if you're going to add your ICP on LinkedIn, don't message them for 6 months. And that's really hard, because salespeople feel pressure from leadership, as they should, right? Because there's numbers to be hit. So it's really difficult when you know who your ICP is and you you feel like you can't speak to them. I'm not saying don't send them an email or a message, but for me personally, it's actually worked not speaking to them until they engage with something they think they want to engage with. That is jackpot, right? Now, I've had a message in the past where I was trying to speak to them for months via email, got nothing. Then to get them to message me on LinkedIn, say, hey, not sure what you guys do, but I like you and I like George. Can you help us? That is what you need to screenshot and show to your CEO or your leadership team who might be pushing back against you for wanting investment into A or B. But also, and me and George spoken like this before, is who in the business wants to be that brand, that face of the brand.
This is key.
Right? Because I could try and sell to CEOs all day long. One thing I don't have is being a CEO. Right? I've never been a CEO or a CFO, but do you know who they would listen to? Probably another CEO or another CFO. Right? So how can we push the brand of individuals in the business at a peer-to-peer level against our ICP?
And this goes back to something that we were talking about prior to, setting record on and going live on the cameras, is finding the right person internally or the right people internally to make sure that this works. And that's that's a really difficult challenge for a business to come across. Normally it would be the founder or the CEO. Why? Because they're incentivized to be in the company long term. So therefore their personal brand will benefit that company long term. Normally the salespeople, what's the average tenure for a salesperson? 12 to 18 months?
Depends which business you're working.
Depends which business, but in payments, pretty short. So are they going to trust a salesperson to build a personal brand and stick with that company long term? Probably not. But then again, most CEOs don't trust themselves to be a vocal point for the business because they are afraid of upsetting future investors, future venture capital firms, all these different things, or negative press. So you're fighting two different battles from each side, and it's a really difficult challenge, but it does have to fundamentally start from the top. I say that controversially because we didn't. We actually didn't. I was the person that kind of initiated it, and then I got yourself and Grant on it as heads of. But fundamentally, if we look at some of the brands that have done this incredibly well, they're normally founder-led content or they're founder-led growth. And that's where this becomes really important and very interesting when you follow those brands' journey. It gets incredibly interesting.
It goes back to that kind of entertained or educated piece. I think if you were a CEO and you saw another CEO talking about the challenges of being a CEO, you really can relate. I can talk about the challenges that I speak to people about and in payments. But if I was to create a business tomorrow and started talking about how difficult it was to go and raise, how difficult it was to hire a CTO or to hire a team, someone else who's a CEO would have probably gone through that same problem. So there already is common ground. It's just trying to convince everyone. And also, some CEOs don't have time, right? I don't have time to do it. Invest the time. Invest into people to allow them. So we'll talk about Gary Vee on LinkedIn, right? People follow him all day, every day. How quickly can you get content out there to talk about his challenges?
He's a prime example of founder-led growth. He is the founder of Media. Chris Walker. These guys are all founders of their own businesses.
As well. And
Adam Robinson,
hugely successful. But why is it that you think that so many leaders are so reluctant
to do the whole content piece? Again, we spoke about it before, but fundamentally for me, it comes down to insecurity. We could put blueprints out there. We could put I could take over somebody's social media, but that still will make them feel insecure. And it doesn't mean that they're going to post every day. Insecurity is fundamentally the reason people don't do this. And if we could just get over that hurdle, we'd have a lot more personal brands out there, that's for sure, which is also why if it was easy, everybody would do it. This isn't easy. Consistently posting on LinkedIn, trusting yourself to do so is an incredibly hard thing to do. And I respect everybody that's doing it consistently because I know personally how hard it is. But fundamentally, it's insecurity. And how do you get over that? I mean, I'm not a psychologist, so I'm not going to give any advice on that, but just start. And again, that's far easier said than done. But it's the difference between simple and easy, isn't it?
Yes. The answer is simple, but it's not easy.
It's simple, but it's not easy. And the only barrier of entry is insecurity when we think about it. But it can be as easy as finding a point in your week where you are delivering value, finding a point in which, do you know what, I'm on a customer call. I'm a manager and I'm talking to an employee and I'm giving some advice. Just set your phone up. Your phone's got a better camera on it than Hollywood had 15 years ago. So use it. Turn the phone around, forget it's there, and just deliver how you would deliver your job every day. And you will be astounded how much value you actually create on a consistent basis every week, and just post that.
I think that's a good piece there. Creating content's the easy piece. Is how you distribute the content. Because actually you create content every single day. Every single conversation you have with internal colleagues, external prospects, you are creating content because you're talking about what you do. You're talking about your challenges that they have or you have. It's just how you put that content and distribute it to the rest of the industry. That's the piece that people get nervous about. And I think it's just, I've seen a lot of people do it for 3 or 4 weeks and then it kind of tumbles away because they're struggling with things to think of. If you can continue to send cold emails, you can continue to...
It's like the gym though, isn't it?
Absolutely. It has to become a habit.
It's terribly hard to start with.
Yep.
But it's not, you don't go to the gym, lift a few weights and get ripped one. It's all about consistency. And it's also, it gets easier the more that you do it.
Yeah. And it's the strategy behind it. It's far too, from the conversations I've had, far too many people strategize over social media. And again, using the gym analogy, you don't get a big chest by reading how to do push-ups. You have to do push-ups. So you're only going to learn how to do social media better by doing it. If you get it wrong, you get it wrong. No one's going to call you out for it. And if they do, feel sorry for them. It's nothing to do with you. They're willing to call you out on social media. They've got far more problems than you have.
Yeah.
Just deal with it.
I've put out some terrible posts on LinkedIn. I've put out some absolutely terrible posts. Yeah. I've used ChatGPT where I copy it and paste it. But I think, I look back and I think that is terrible. But you know what? Not one person's ever turned around to me and said that was a terrible post.
Yeah.
people go, I always see what you put on LinkedIn. People are quite naive, right? We're quite fickle as individuals. You always remember the good stuff that people are, not necessarily the bad stuff. And actually, if you I couldn't tell you the post that I put on LinkedIn 3 weeks ago. I couldn't tell you the post that you would have put on LinkedIn 3 weeks ago.
I couldn't tell you a post I read this morning.
No.
And that's how quick our attention is now. So why are we overthinking what we're posting? Just post how you feel, or thoughts and opinions and something you think might help someone. They'll forget it in an hour, but they might find it valuable when they read it.
And also accept that when you first start out, I mean, I remember when I first started creating, spending an hour and a half on a single post trying to get it perfect. And that's a part of the learning cycle of anything.
Yeah.
You get better at things.
Yep.
But to your point, George, just begin.
Yeah, just begin. And I think the just begin piece is, if we can start to think about content creation like it's documenting our week versus sitting and actually just creating content, it's a far easier process to actually do. Document what you're doing every day versus sit there with a blank piece of paper and think, what do I post this week? Because that, even after 5 years of posting on LinkedIn consistently, I still can't look at a blank screen and say, what do I post this week? I document what I do every day and every week. That just makes it far easier for me. And it's what the habits that I've built. And it all starts with habits. We know this. If you can build a habit every week of saying, right, I'm going to post 3 times a week, get over the procrastination by just doing once, do it once, see the positive things on it, and you'll start to build a bit of momentum. People will start to comment. You'll get your first like from an ICP. I remember how that feels. And then all of a sudden it will become a habit and you'll get addicted to it, quite literally.
Yeah, and I think that the way that everyone does it is different, right? So George might put down all of his meetings. I look at my calendar and go, right, this was the meeting I had. This is what we spoke about. Let me do a LinkedIn post on that. And I agree. It used to take me a long time.
Without summarising any highly confidential information.
Of course, yeah. Exactly that. And I used to think for so long about what to post on LinkedIn. And but actually, I scroll through LinkedIn without even thinking, right? You probably got around a second, maybe 2 of someone reading your post and then on to the next one. But when you're doing it every single day, people start to get interested. The algorithm starts to play its game. And then actually there's people I see on LinkedIn where I don't really like some of their posts, but I see them every day.
Yeah.
Right. And when I say I don't like some of their posts, because sometimes I don't agree with them, and I used to just scroll past them. Well, actually, if I don't agree with what someone's put, tell them. That's not me calling people out, but actually they could be telling me something that I could learn about. Then I start being educated. And I seen a post yesterday, someone started talking about the cost of acquisition, and I didn't really understand the whole post. So I asked the question, and actually he gave me some really, really good feedback that I'd never even thought of. So you just don't stop learning.
But you were still top of mind for him.
Absolutely. Exactly. And that was nothing to do with payments. It was to do with marketing. I'm very new into trying to learning about marketing, but actually it's the mindset of the buyer that I'm more interested in than if someone's coming on to Google or find us at a networking event.
It's a really interesting shift, actually, that I've noticed over the last 3 years, having been in marketing and sales in the past, is I think within an organization, some of your best marketers are your salespeople. And I think we often think that flipping the script on its head, which is one of the things I posted about this morning, which is we're in a world where content has to be pumped out at such a scale that B2B companies are often outsourcing that facility. That outsourcing facility doesn't know your ICP in any way, shape or form like you do. So the content that comes out of it is normally something based on AI that you could probably create internally at the same capacity. So with salespeople not becoming less busy, but actually trying to create personal brands for themselves, let's actually, as a marketing function, flip it on its head and say, well, let's get the salespeople to actually help us create our content, whether that's through a podcast, through a blog, through whatever it might be, a newsletter, and let's repurpose that. It creates far better content because your salespeople are talking to your ICP as much as they possibly can. So they're going to have better insights than you or AI.
Creating video format, I do think that sometimes there's this internal perception within businesses that if you want to create video, you get a professional production company to come on site and they'll film your annual conference and they'll charge you 15,000 euros to cut together a 1 minute video. So actually, no, we can't afford to do that, as opposed to, as you say, get your iPhone, get a small light and you know, create it in as quickly as it takes to view it.
Yep. And I think there's a reason TikTok's had the scale it's had over the last however many years. There isn't really anybody on TikTok using a professional camera setup like a TV channel. because it doesn't need to. If you go and buy a new TV now, it's got TikTok as an actual app on the TV, because they know people are go on their TV and start scrolling through it now, because that's the type of content people want to watch and consume.
It's also a reason why on LinkedIn now they've moved the post icon to the top right. It's actually a much smaller logo than what video is now, because people like consuming video content.
Video is fundamentally the best form of content, and
which I struggle with, by the way. I really struggle with video content.
Well, you struggle in an environment where you feel forced to do it.
Yeah, so I would struggle to put you up and start talking into the video.
George, does he know he's on video? Right?
Yeah, I know. Does he know we're recording it right now?
I just struggle to record myself or look into a camera and start talking, because I just feel like I'm not doing something right. Actually, being videoed in a more informal setting is a lot easier for me, but everybody works differently. You've got influencers that want to put the camera, look into the camera and say, get ready with me, here's what I'm doing. So the way that different people consume that media is always going to be different. It's just making sure that you're being seen, right? It's being top of mind. And for me personally, when someone goes onto LinkedIn, they see what I do what I'm talking about in the morning, I post it for the same time every single day. So maybe that's not necessarily the best thing, because maybe I'm only seeing the same people, right? Maybe some people don't go on LinkedIn until lunchtime or LinkedIn until the evening. Then I'm praying that my post is getting the engagement it needs, so that person's still seeing that 5 or 6 or 7 hours later. And that's why maybe the people that businesses now are born from LinkedIn and that social media piece are posting 3, 4, 5 times a day. I definitely don't have time to be doing.
If you did want to create video in a room like this, I mean, we're in a studio, but there's a camera that's about 800 quid. You've got a mic about 120 quid, light about 100 quid, and put it in your common room. Set it up there, so you could set up your own studio quality for.
It's a lot cheaper than it's a lot cheaper than a salesperson, right?
But I think fundamentally, it doesn't matter how you package content. If the content's still rubbish, it doesn't matter how good it looks. And I think and this falls into the barriers of entry thing, into how it creates content. People often overthink the way it looks versus the content actually being delivered. We could have done this at a very, very much lower budget. We could have done this on our phones, just sat there, set 3 up and gone with it and ran with it, or we could have done it virtually. The content that you deliver is far more superior than the level of which you're delivering it at. And I think that's something that businesses don't quite understand yet, which is they want to be corporate, they want to be on brand, they want to be polished. And I just don't think people want to see that anymore. I think people want to see walking around out for lunch with a couple of colleagues and there's a camera and you're all mic'd up and you're actually talking about real life things. And you're in an environment where they would see themselves. You know, everybody watches Stephen Bartlett's Diary of a CEO, but I think if you don't resonate with being in a studio, talking to high level profile people, I'm not sure that content's going to massively resonate with you to a point where you're really going to fall in love with it and you're really going to engage with it. But if you see your colleagues out for lunch having conversations with people you personally know, you're going to get involved with it.
I think this has been the uplift. You look at the docu-series around sports teams, right? Because people are seeing people in their everyday lives, whether it's Sunderland Till I Die, whether it's about Wrexham Football Club, whether it's about Drive to Survive or Full Swing. It's just people doing their job, right? They're creating content. They're doing this already. The sports stars that are a part of these shows are not doing anything differently because there's a camera in front of them.
Yep.
What the difference is now, someone's now putting that in front of the rest of the world for them to see. And actually, it gains people being interested in their lives. And then people are drawn into it. And that's what I find quite interesting, just the psychology around the way that people want to see people's lives and be entertained by someone's challenges, which sounds crazy. And that's where it comes back to the whole, if you were creating a business and you're part of a leadership team, there's going to be other leaders at other businesses that are having the same struggles. And I think if you can see that someone else having those struggles, it just brings some kind of trust because you know they're having the same issues you are.
One of the most important things that I'm just going to revisit it to close off is this issue of measurement. Like, do you think that companies need to simply just get past thinking of everything as leads? And are there any particular examples that you can share where, you know, the perhaps your content has added value,
Absolutely,
but hasn't been given the attribution of the lead?
I can categorically say that me posting on LinkedIn has been the one reason why we have won business. as in a business, a deal, was because of what I post on LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
Now, convincing others in the business that that wouldn't have happened if I wasn't posting on LinkedIn, you never know, right? And it's not necessarily an us and them versus marketing versus social media. It is only going to be showing revenue, right? The deals that I brought in because of what I've been posting on LinkedIn, would that have happened any other way? I don't think so, but I cannot categorically say it wouldn't have. Now, I've seen some leads that come through the website. 98% of leads that come through the website are not great leads, right? I can say at least 60% of leads that come through LinkedIn are good leads. That's a difference. And there's a reason why LinkedIn now has the feature that you can message a business directly on LinkedIn, because people would rather use LinkedIn than they would just going on to the business's website. So for me, the ROI is there. It's absolutely there. The investment needs to be there. And for me personally, those guys coming over to NoMePay, the reason for it, and I think a big reason, is because what we've been talking about. We know that we can be sales leaders. We talk about payments, talk about challenges, and we know the industry. I can't put that on my CV. How do I put that on a CV that I know what I'm talking about? Because if you compare my CV to 15 other sales leaders, there probably wouldn't be much difference.
And to your point, yes, I do believe that businesses need to stop trying to measure everything. I do believe that B2B marketing is around 5 to 6 to maybe 7 years behind B2C. And we see how outlandish some B2C kind of marketing campaigns are. You know, some B2C brands will, I don't know, they'll get a Range Rover, they'll spray paint something on it and they'll leave it in the middle of London. How are you going to measure what that does for your brand? There is simply no way that you could possibly measure that. Now, we're already on that journey in B2B, and one of those biggest Range Rovers is a personal brand within your business. You can't simply measure how often your post is seen, who it's seen by. You can only measure it quantitatively by numbers, you know, impressions, engagements, comments, whatever it might be, reposts, shares, whatever. But there is no categorical, apart from the thing I mentioned earlier around self-reported attribution, it's incredibly difficult. But I can fundamentally say, having now done it for nearly 2 years with 2 personal brands, that it makes a huge difference to where your brand will be in the next 12 to 18 months.
Sharing from my own personal experience, I personally get inbound, but actually that's not the greatest value driver. The thing that I repeatedly see is when I sit down and meet with a company, with a potential client, they build the agenda for that meeting based on the content that I have produced.
Yep.
So were they the reason that I was introduced to them? Often no, but has that influenced their likelihood to buy?
I can sit here now and say I personally have screenshot your LinkedIn post and sent it to people. You would never know that.
Nope.
You would never know that if I didn't tell you.
And there's no way for me to.
How do you measure
There's
that?
no way for you to know.
Never.
Nope.
I could have sent it to someone who sent it to somebody else, and then they might message you on LinkedIn and say, "Oh, someone sent it to me, I can't remember who." Yeah, how do you attribute that to anything? So I think it is a leap of faith to say, actually, we can't measure this investment, but we're happy to take the punt. You're not investing millions, right? It's different to bringing on a new marketing agency where you're paying £5,000 a month retainer. I have seen proposals for people to be ghostwriters for CEOs on LinkedIn coming at £8,000 a month. That for me shows as ROI if businesses think it's valid enough to even put that on a proposal.
Yeah.
Because they are seeing, if you look at the average ticket size for a business versus the investment into the platform, shows there's a reason why businesses are being successful.
I mean, fundamentally, it comes down to attention. That's all it ever comes down to. And with privacy policies, GDPR, all this internet privacy is only going to get harder to track people on the internet. It's not going to get any easier. People don't want to be seen on the internet. So with that in mind, you trying to measure something that's already unmeasurable, it's not going to get easier for you. So stop trying to measure it. Just look at things, look at history about where people have day traded continuous attention all the time. You know, what at one point for B2B and B2C, it was the yellow pages. The next thing it was the TV. Now it's social media. We have to be on social media at scale, whether you're a B2C or a B2B brand. If you want to be taken seriously, I genuinely believe that. You have to look at where the attention is, and not only just attention, but underpriced attention. There's attention on a Super Bowl ad, but it costs you multi-millions of pounds and dollars. But it costs nothing to post on LinkedIn. Absolutely nothing. Whereas we're spending a lot of money in other marketing campaigns. I think marketing teams should start thinking or putting their content on the same pedestal as their website. If we can start doing that and invest money in content the same way we put the website in a spotlight, I genuinely think we'll get far more better leads, and we'll have a far better brand exposure if we start to invest in content the same way we do other things as marketing teams.
We're just about out of time. I mean, the question I always close with all of my guests is, if you could leave the audience with one thing, what would it be, Justin?
For me, it's invest in the team to distribute more content. I would say a demand generation team over a big sales team.
Get your phone out and record your next meeting with a prospect. Just do it. Watch it back. If you cringe, don't worry. Stick it into CapCut. Put some captions on it on a point where you think you're delivering, and post it. And I will genuinely shake your hand personally if you do that, because it will help you massively and you'll start to see a bit of consistency come from that. But please just start. Don't worry about the insecurity behind it, because it quite frankly doesn't exist.
Gents, thank you very much for joining us. It's been great.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.